Welcome to So You Want to Be an Ally. We share our stories
and our insights on non-Black allyship to Black women.
My name is Darlene. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I help parents advocate for their Black and brown kids' emotional and racial identity development needs. And that's because our kids deserve the opportunity to grow, learn, strive, and thrive.
My name is Olanike. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my life experience led me to becoming an advocate for equity in the workplace, which led me to starting a consulting business where I help workplaces who want to do better. Want to be an ally? Gather round
and listen up.
Okay, so we have a new 3-part series for you listeners out there. We want to talk about incidents. We want to talk about microaggression, and we're going to tackle it in 3 different episodes. The first episode is exploring what is going through our minds when these incidents happen, when we are at the receiving end of a microaggression. So that's the conversation we're going to have today. We want to set some context. We want to set the context for what are all the things that are already in flight, in play, and what's happening in our minds and in our hearts and in our bodies, right, when these incidents happen.
Right.
So that's going to be an important conversation for today. The next 2 episodes are continuing in that journey. So the next episode we're going to talk about what you might see when these incidents are happening, when an ally is in the presence of a microaggression in play and they're observing it, or when they are the aggressor, which does happen, folks. Just because you're an ally does not mean that you don't step in it sometimes. So we're going to have that discussion on the next episode. The third part of this is we're going to get into some advice and things for you to consider in terms of how to respond and what to do when these incidents take place. Would you add anything to that, Darlene?
No, my dear. I think you covered it quite nicely. I think
Right.
I think the context is super important for everything that's going on, especially in light of the reactions and responses that people are giving. So I know it's tough for allies right now in this current climate because a lot of different reactions. So I think it's important to get a glimpse of what's going in the mind of many of us Black folk, Black women specifically, but a lot of Black people in general. And the mental exhaustion, why you're constantly seeing posts about self-care and racial trauma and racial
and the nap
stress
ministry.
And,
I need to take a nap. I need to rest.
not the nap ministry.
Oh, it's an Instagram account. You think I'm joking?
Really?
Yes.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
Yes. They posted a picture of Congressman John Lewis laying in the bed under a quilt. I mean, it just gets to your soul. You just feel like he's like your granddaddy or your uncle.
Man.
Because it's even he rested, right? There's this picture. I'm actually not sure what the context of the photo is.
But that's how it spoke to you.
But that's how it spoke to me.
A nap.
We need to rest.
We do. We're tired.
Yeah.
We are tired.
I think, Darlene, if you could speak to this. So when we first had this idea of having an episode about what to do as an ally or preferably as an accomplice when there's a microaggression happening in your presence, our first thought was to go to what are the things you can say? How do you prepare yourself? Even for us as Black women, how do we prepare ourselves in advance so we can just have our responses at the ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But there's even now more so than probably 6 months ago, there's actually some articles and other conversations that have been had about what to do in the moment. Mm-hmm. But Darlene paused us to say we're not talking about all the things that are happening before we get into that moment. I think it might be good for you to explain that, Darlene, because that was powerful, and that's why this one episode turned into 3 episodes, so we could really get underneath this thing in a way that would be meaningful.
So as you said, we were thinking about, if you remember, we were actually talking about kids. We were talking about our children and preparing our children
Yes.
for the racially charged environment that they're in right now. And it has been a huge thing for me to address the mental health aspects of discrimination and racism. There is a ton of research out there that shows what's going on. We've had national conversations and actual legislation. People have been taking stances on the public health crisis that is racism. And because of the physical and mental challenges that's connected and related to these experiences. Of course, as a person of Parent Zone, who's a parent who loves the community, who loves the youth, I was thinking we need to do a better job of preparing our kids for this crap.
Right.
So we started thinking like, well, if we can do that for the kids, and you know, I'm always, you know, we're always talking about how to, you know, what's quick ways to get at people when they, you know, try to slide something racist in at you, and how to protect your emotional energy, right? Because we're always so quick to react and respond. What's those quick little one-liners you can give to somebody to separate and pull back that emotional energy that you're putting out there to correct them, or, you know, whatever it takes. And because it always pulls you into this dialogue about, you know, they didn't mean it, or that wasn't their intention, and then that's frustrating to you, and so you start exerting all this emotional energy.
Yeah, they're gaslighting you. That's not really what happened, or it becomes about professionalism, or I just don't think that's professional, or we should talk about that in the workplace. All kinds of nonsense comes out.
Or you are sitting in a meeting of some sort and somebody says something sideways, but you hold yourself together just to get through the meeting. And then you go back to your office and you're doing your mental gymnastics the whole time about what you woulda, shoulda, coulda done. Or did they really say that? Or am I overreacting? We've all had those conversations with people. We've had that, and we will continue to have those conversations. So with everything that was going on and my mental health background, I'm thinking, what can we do to be better at this? Because this is not a good use of our energy, y'all. We have way bigger battles to fight. So what can we do? But then I thought, well, we kind of can't do anything without first giving a context. Because again, linking it back to what the function of this podcast is for our allies. So that kind of led us into thinking about, okay, separate over here in this arena, we have those who are being accosted, those who are being microaggressed against. Yeah, that's one conversation. How do we prepare our kids? But again, coming back to this podcast, we have allies. We have people who are interested, who intend to go out here and do the work, who want to support us. But honestly, they don't know what's on our minds. And oftentimes, like all of this stuff, sometimes we don't even know these processes are going on. So it's important. We wanted to piece out, like parse out all the pieces, outline it, organize it, so that everyone can kind of get a picture, a glimpse into all the background things that are going on that are happening so quick, which is why we don't know all these things are happening. And so from the Black woman's perspective, again, trying to preserve our emotional and mental energy, this will be helpful for, you know, you to hear, oh man, that's why I did that, or that's why I spent, or this is the question I have, or that's why I answered some of those questions for you. And for the allies, you also get the, oh, that's why they say that. Oh, that's what's going on. Oh, that's the look on their face. Oh, that's what they're thinking. In a way that is completely different from the traditional allyship conversation that goes along. Are we defining microaggression? Is it really a microaggression? Blah, blah, blah. We're just going to all agree, touch and agree on the idea that it is an aggression. It is a microaggression, whether you intended it to be or not. We focus on impact. So as I said to Nikkei before, and I'm saying to my allies, I want you to really think about, are you interested in not trying to being a racist? Are you interested in actually not being or functioning or sounding like a racist? Because that's an important piece. And so being an ally, you've already had a conversation with yourself that says, I acknowledge that these systems and oppressive actions and behaviors exist, and I want to do something about that. And so because of that, these are the things that are naturally occurring in these environments.
Yeah, you said something, and I want to make sure it didn't go over people's heads. Are you interested in actually practicing anti-racism? Or are you just interested in not looking like a racist?
Those are different.
Those are two different things.
They're very different.
They're very, very different. So that's important. That's maybe a hard question, but that's an important question to answer, because, I feel like I've been in conversation with white women, actually, specifically, where I can almost see them having that struggle live in front of me.
Yep.
Like, oh,
several times.
You just said something to me, and man, but you know me, we're cool, but they're like, but I also want to hear what you're saying, but I don't want you to think of me this way. And you're like, so, it's first of all, it's human to have that inclination, right? To be like, but I don't want you to think of me like that's absolutely normal and human for you to feel that way. Yet and still, we are still calling you into that space of practicing what it means to really take feedback and to really continue to practice this new lifestyle. And just sit with how challenging it is to start to live a life where you're striving to be anti-racist versus a life of just not wanting to look like you're racist, or a life where because that's really about, that second piece is about you, and choosing a life of continuing evolution and continuing to learn all the different ways to be anti-racist is really about the community at large. It's really about others.
Yep, very well said.
Let's get into this. Let's dive in. What is going through our minds when there is an incident? There are a couple of stories I think we could share.
Ooh. Oh boy.
Where I think something's happened and we've reacted. Well, I guess I'll speak for myself. And looking back, I'm like, man, I really just react. I just responded in that moment. And I was responding to a microaggression, right? And I had to stand up for me and mine because of whatever the situation was. I'm actually thinking about my Whole Foods story. Because that one was deep for me because it involved my daughter. And but it was definitely
Mother Bear. You went Mother Bear?
Yeah, I went Mother Bear at a Whole Foods as a result of a microaggression. And the girl that got it, the Whole Foods employee that got all of my Mother Bearness that day, might have been wondering, man, what is up with this lady? What, goodness great, what? She came out of nowhere. Should we define microaggression? I think
Go right ahead.
We might be making an assumption that people know what we're talking about.
People know. And great catch, by the way. Great catch.
Yeah. So microaggressions are, I've heard it described as death by 1,000 cuts. There are everyday ways that if you're walking around this world as a Black woman, as we are, you're constantly getting messaging about how lesser than you are in lots of different ways. And sometimes it's just passive messages, and other times it's active. There's specific things that people might say that are really demeaning, and sometimes they come from well-intentioned people, who may even describe themselves. Yeah, they might describe themselves as an ally, but they're part of a majority group and they don't have the lens, right? And they haven't, they don't know enough to know that thing that they're saying or doing actually may have a hidden message to it that's really hurtful.
Well done, well said.
So that's how I would describe what a microaggression is. A few examples that you might hear is he, look at that. Yeah, he's so articulate. A lot of people said this about President Obama. He's so articulate. It's what did you expect him to sound like? Why is it so special that he can string words together in the English language?
Several colleges. He's very well educated. Why would he not be articulate? Well, that's because an ingrained concept and view and prejudicial, and this is where why it's microaggressive. The prejudicial underpinnings of that is that Black folks are not educated, therefore they don't have the language or the vocabulary or the schooling to piece together such a sentence as what I just stated. So, so Obama is articulate because he can piece simple sentences together. And it happens at the most minor level where folks are given a presentation, and it's very basic, by the way. It's not like I pulled a rabbit out of the hat, but no, seriously, but the expectation of the person standing in front of you is so low that you are often in awe of the wonderful job that was done. Yeah.
Yep. We have a mutual friend. I guess we won't call her out, but we were on like a Zoom call a month or two ago, and she was talking about like producing, work and people being surprised when they find out that was her report or that was her thing, that like, oh, you put that together? Wow. That's not a compliment. Why are you so surprised that I like what? Yes, I put that together. What is that about? Right? So yeah, those are just a couple of examples. In one scenario, I guess in both scenarios, the microaggressor might feel like those were actual compliments.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You're complimenting me on something that is so basic, tells me that you expected so much less from me. And why is that? And when those low expectations are tied to stereotypes about Black people or Black women, then that's a violent statement that you just made to me, because your expectation of me was so low that you were surprised because I'm Black or because I'm a woman.
And that is the piece that often, again, because we're getting into what the Black woman is thinking as they're being microaggressed against. So we're opening the curtain, we're lifting the veil. This is what we're thinking. That is not a compliment. And now you're offended because I didn't accept your compliment because you don't understand why I didn't receive it as a compliment. That wasn't a compliment to me. I am an educated, well-versed, spent all this time to enhance my craft. I don't want a pat on the back for a PowerPoint. I'm sorry. And on top of that, something that always burns my butt is when I get a compliment for how put together I look or how nice I dress. I was livid when I got that as an award in my program. I was livid.
Wait, it was an award?
I'm in a whole PhD program. And the superlative that you want to give me is that I dress nice. Not that I am killing in cultural competency and diversity. Not that I always, y'all, for real, like my skill. I might be, I have my challenges with writing, but my skill is conceptualization. Anybody will tell you that. And you gave me an award for how nice I look and how nice I dress. You have to understand what conceptualization is clearly a thinking skill. Meaning when I tell y'all my conceptualizations were on point. And you gave me an award because I look nice. Ooh. So for the women who are not of color, they're probably thinking, yeah, I have that experience too. So you can relate to that on one level. Yeah. Now let me take it to a higher level and show you the nuance of not only do you not see me as a thoughtful person, I'm less educated, but now you're also awarding me because I can pull myself together as a Black person. Does you expect me to look dirty? What the? And if you've ever been in any clinical program and we have conversations about how you present yourself, that's a part of your presentation as a clinician. And this is, everybody knows it if you've ever been in a program. If you're a clinician listening to this, you know how there is a complete difference in how a person of color or a Black person presents in a clinical program than traditional white people. There's conversation about the difference in gender, about how women dress versus men dress. Oh, heck yeah. And and again, if I had a panel of Black people and we're having a conversation, it's like, yeah, some of the things that white women were wearing, I wouldn't wear. And it boils down to body.
That does make sense though.
Right?
Yeah.
But it also boils down to what I carried as a person who was often microaggressed against, or even sometimes my perceived, right? I didn't want to be in the position where somebody pulled me in to say, well, you're not dressing professionally. Right. I had to think about my hair and how I wore my hair. And I had a conversation with a woman who, a colleague of mine, when I did something like a puff out with my hair or something, or no, I think it was braids, because you know, as a Black person, I change my hair all the time. I actually had to tell my clinician, my supervisor, like, hey, I'm going to change my hair all the time because there's a conversation about whether or not changing your hair can impact therapy. So she and I had a conversation like, you should wear your hair like that all the time. And I was like, yeah, I probably can't. It was during the summer period when I didn't have as many clients. And I said, I probably can't because, and I gave her a list of things and she didn't understand. So these are things that are intended well, like somebody thought that was great for me and I was completely offended. And one could say, well, you're being sensitive, or, you know, you're not open to positive feedback, or all these things that you can say. But that person not knowing the nuances of this, again, not that you intended anything to happen, but that's the intention. And now take that and look at how often that occurs. And then you can see the microaggression. That is not in this isolated incident. This is, if I went back 50 years and talked to Black people who were in that program, or other Black women across the nation, and the superlatives they received, you might find a couple who got it for thoughtfulness. I would then go interview the person who made the suggestion and see what awareness they have of microaggression versus the number of people who don't have that awareness, and how easily and how common it is for that to come up. It's so nuanced. It's so subtle.
Yeah, it's very, very subtle. Yeah. So with that, we're all on the same page. Man, some of what you just said, man, it's such a shame. We can unpack it, Oh, like segment, right? What?
It's a whole other segment. Okay. I know.
So
back to Mama Bear.
Yeah, let's get back to my Mama Bear story. So the Whole Foods story is, my daughter and I are in Whole Foods, and before we get ready to check out, she wanted some gelato. So we walk over to the counter in the sort of on the side, right, in the cafe area where they have the gelato. And we stand there for a few minutes. We can see I'm calling her girl because she was probably like 20 years old or something, maybe mid-20s.
She's a young adult.
She's a young adult, really. The young adults.
Too many words.
The girl. Yeah, the girl. The young lady that was working behind the counter. She was white, or at least white presenting. And she was over at the cash register, right? She was over at the cash register checking someone out. So we're just kind of sitting there and I'm like, okay, looks like that person might take a little while. I'm going to go to the register and check out. Baby girl, you stay here. She was maybe 8 years old at the time, maybe 9. I think maybe more like 9. So you stay here. I'm going to go to the cash register. I can see her from the cash register and she can see me. When young lady behind the counter comes over, tell her what you want and let her know that I'll be right back. So she's standing there, and because I'm my eyes are always on her in public, like I'm not taking my eye off of her, because even though I'm at the cash register, because I'm keeping an eye on her and making sure she's okay. As I'm at the cash register, waiting in that line, I see 2 white girls. Now these are actual girls about her same age, walk up together. And they start, perusing the options, the gelato options as well. The cashier, after the white girls get there, walks over and starts engaging the 2 girls white girls that just walked over in conversation. So I see her basically starting to serve the 2 girls, and I lost it. I marched out of line. No, I was like, I'm not checking out right now. I can't even check out right now. What the heck is going on?
You said, so I marched. Not about to do.
What we're not gonna do is act like right, like she wasn't here waiting for much longer. I mean, she and I waited there together for a while before I walked away. And I was still watching her before these 2 girls walked up, and then the cashier walked over. So if you were just kind of in the area watching, here's what you would have seen happen. I march over there. I interrupt the conversation that she's having with the two girls, and I look at them, you know, in a way to say, like, excuse me, girls, right? Like,
Yes.
I need to talk to her for a minute, because
I
it's not their
acknowledge
fault.
you, and
I acknowledge them. They did absolutely nothing wrong. It wasn't about them,
Right.
And I wanted them to know that it's, you know, like, they're okay. So I kind of walk over and I look at the two girls and said, hey, girls, like, and I look at the young lady and I said, I'm sorry, did you see that my daughter was here ahead of them? Why did you not serve her first, right? And I don't remember exactly what she said, but, you know, it was some version of, I didn't know, I didn't see her, I wasn't sure, I just walked over here, something like that.
So we have uncertainty and invisibility.
To which I say to her, why didn't you just ask?
Yeah.
Right? You just completely ignored her. I was standing here with her. I walked off. I saw these two young girls come over afterwards, and you just went straight to serving them.
Yes.
Why is that? Like, now, you know, so, and I'm animated. Yes. I'm not cussing though. I'm not like I'm not like, you know, cussing at her or anything crazy like that. But I was very annoyed, very frustrated. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then she immediately starts asking, you know, what does she want? What do you want? And then she gives her like an extra scoop of gelato. I didn't even want her to have the first scoop in the first place. I'm like, I don't need the extra scoop. Like, that's not what I need from you.
We're taking our service.
I don't want her to have that much sugar in the first place. What I really wanted you to do is acknowledge her and see her and not treat her like she's invisible.
Yes.
I don't want her to have that, to accept that as she grows up. Yes. And I'm sure the young lady had no context and she just thought I got mad because somebody else got served first. And that's probably was the beginning and the end of what she thought was going on.
Yep.
But what was going on was so much deeper than that. And even my daughter was like, oh my God, Mom, you're so embarrassing. Why did you have to yell at her?
Because she didn't get it either.
And because she didn't understand what was happening either.
Too. Yep.
I think she gets it now at 13 years old.
I'm sure she does.
But back then, she didn't get it. She was just like, it was okay. It's okay. It's okay, Mom. It's okay. And I'm like, no, it's not okay.
Yes.
Because what we have to live with in this society, in these, as I like to say, in these United States,
right,
is always being invisible. When we're walking down the sidewalk, we, the Black and brown people, have to move out of the way of the white people. And if we think back to Jim Crow laws, some of these were actual factual laws on the books. So the history is so deep in this country of, like, the general have been taught in this country that Black and brown people are invisible and it's okay to not see us. It happens all the time.
And the only time we are allowed to be visible on a global stance, right, just on a general stance, is for the stereotypical reasons, right, whether they be positive or negative, right? Yeah. So you're either a criminal or a thug, or you're an excellent athlete, right? You're not allowed to be a regular Joe Schmo engineer. You're not allowed to drive a BMW and live in a nice neighborhood just because, right? Because if you're driving in a neighborhood just cause, then you must be a thug. You couldn't live here. You can be a regular Joe Schmo. Or I should say, Joe is a Black name too. You could be a Joe Schmo Black. Yeah. Black Joe Schmo. And that's the problem, right? So we get put into two spaces. Either we're overly observed for mostly negative reasons.
For negative reasons, yeah.
Or we're invisible and we don't exist in the space.
Right. And it's interesting because in that incident, like, I wasn't thinking about all these things. I was just like, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to serve her first.
and literally on the sheer principle that she was here first. So this is also the nuance, right? Like from the person looking out, who was standing out looking in on the situation. they're making assumptions and interpreting your behavior. So obviously the first thing to come up if you're animated is she's an angry Black woman. You're not angry for no other reason than being an angry Black woman. Nobody factoring in, because they don't know the context either. Right? They don't know everything that's happened. So again, everybody's jumping to conclusions, which is how our mind works. This is what we do. This is why biases are real. This is why discrimination is real. We all have, this is how our brain works. We have to process information quickly in order to make decisions. So that's why we are all susceptible to biases. We are all susceptible to this. But in that moment, it's like nobody understands what's happening. So you're the angry Black woman. And what's sad is that girl, the cashier, just like you said, she doesn't understand the context either. She has these automatic processes that are going on. And even for you at the time, the first layer was not you're treating her like this because she's a Black girl. The first layer was you mistreating my baby. In the discussion, straight mama bear. And then when you start seeking for answers on why she mistreated you, and this is important for the allies and us as Black people, when you start, the incident happens first, and your goal is to resolve the situation. And so you go and seek an understanding because we're trying to problem solve. Think about problem solving processes. So that's when we start inserting all the layers. We say, oh, it's because I'm Black. Oh, it's because I'm a woman. Oh, because I have an attitude. Oh, because, and so we start throwing in all these things, and then we start sifting them out based on information.
I mean, because she had no good answers for why she didn't serve her first. She didn't know. She just walked over there and went straight to the two white girls. I know why you didn't serve her first. But she doesn't even know, right?
So now she probably feels attacked. So now in her mind, it confirms you're an angry Black woman. And then so the cycle continues.
You know, part of why that incident is so like cut so deep is the angle of like, so I have my own stuff, right? I have my own baggage. And when it's me and I see any service person, you know, like gravitating to serve the white people first, or sometimes what happens, like, let's say I'm at the register and there's a line behind me and there's some sort of delay, like I have an item that doesn't have a price tag on it, or I'm trying to return something or whatever. And let's just say it's taken a little bit too long and there's a couple of white people in line behind me. This is what sometimes happens. And all people do it, not just white people, by the way. Matt, do you mind can you just step to the side? I've called my manager. I don't know. Like, do you mind if I just check them out real quick? But when I'm in line behind a white person that's taken a long time, I have never experienced a white person being asked to step aside and wait because you can check me out real quick because I only have an item or two. It's never happened in the reverse, but it has happened multiple times where I am being asked to step aside and wait because I want to help the white people. I don't want to keep these white people waiting. So I have all that baggage, right? So in that moment, I'm sure that's part of like what was rising up inside of me as I see what's happening to my daughter. But secondly, I'm also really intentional about trying to help her see and navigate these waters, right? And the thing that's really nuanced about it for me on a personal level is I was born in the US, but we moved to Nigeria when I was 2. So I was 10 before we moved back to the US. And when I came to the US, I hadn't been steeped in this like white dominant, white supremacist, like white centered culture. I had to learn that starting from the age of 10. And it's like, it's a different experience, right? Because I remember not having to think about these things for the age of 10. And then I remember having to learn how to navigate these waters. And I feel that from my kid. Like, I want to give her what I had pre, you know, and I can't, like, there's no good way, you know, it's whatever, right? But
can we take a moment to acknowledge what you just said? Because I don't want to pass that up. I don't want to speed past that. Just, do you hear what you just said? When you said that, my heart, like, it started to feel heat. Because I have never in my entire existence, and there are not many of us who can say that, which is where this This the African American and the African connection is so real. We have never, as an African American, not been able to be in a space that is not white centered. So wow. So like mind blowing. Wow.
Yeah.
We went to an HBCU.
And that was the closest that I got to it here. I was like, oh my God, finally.
I get to breathe.
Thank God I'm with my people.
Yes. Like people don't understand what homecoming is about, bro. People don't understand the HBCU experience. It's because even though I am in the middle of America, like I get to center Blackness and all its messiness. Because let's be real about what being African American, being Black is in America. It's messy as hell. It's a mess. Going back to even what you were saying earlier, it's like even the example of the cash registers. I don't want people to assume that every cash register you ran across was white, because they probably wasn't. It's even Black cashiers. It was like, hey, do you mind stepping aside? Because even we learn to center white people. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I do not want to pass that up, because this is an excellent segue into racial trauma and mental exhaustion. Not only
talk about it.
Go back and forth between how do we center ourselves and our needs, and then being pushed out from the center, because we go home to our little cohorts and our little bubbles of Blackness in our house. We got Black Twitter. What up?
Hey.
We have always created space for ourselves.
Yes.
And despite trying to create spaces for ourselves, there is always the white entitlement of asking, well, why aren't we allowed? Why can't? The most ignorant thing I ever read was when a white person said, well, why do they have HBCUs? Person? White person. Shows just what you don't know. We have
Read something.
We create our spaces. So how traumatizing is it to have to go back and forth? That baggage that you're talking about is the racial stress that we experience. From 10 years old on up to now, you were immersed in racial stress. That's what that was. Because you were knocked out the center and forced to learn and engage in a system that told you that you were no longer in the center.
Right.
That's what you were told. Yeah. Somebody else is more important than you. That's the message you get all the time. Yeah. Somebody else is more important. That's exactly what it was. And then every time you try to fight, right? Or every time you try to recenter yourself, or every time you try to focus on yourself, the white-centered environment always presses on you, right?
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, the U.S. surgeon said in 2000 that racial mental health disparities were connected to racism. There was a whole paper written in 2007 by Robert Carter, published on the emotional injury of racism.
Wow.
In 2020, they have finally said, not everybody, but some people, that racism is a public health crisis, y'all. So all the little things that you were talking about, that baggage that you're talking about, we all carrying it. We're just dealing with it in different ways. We are constantly experiencing, going back to the microaggressions, we are constantly experiencing slight threats and injuries. They're slight. What I mean by slight is they're like, sometimes they're subtle, and we experience more of the subtle ones than we do well, I shouldn't say that. Some of us are privileged enough, because that is a privilege, to not have to face a larger, more immediate threat every day. I know there are some of us in smaller communities, more white-centered communities, some of these back spaces, or going into workspaces where they overtly racist, and you just get in there and step it up, right? Like these are things that are happening every single day. So it is a privilege for me to say that I'm not outright, accosted every single day in the way that some people are still doing it and experiencing it today. And those subtle things that I'm talking about is like the humiliation of centering yourself and being proud of something you done, and then it either be attributed to you acting white or trying to be white. My black just doesn't me, bro. Like I need you to know that I am excellent, honey. And it's because I'm black. It ain't because I talk white. It ain't because I act white. It ain't because I sound white. Because if you ever saw me on a panel, I'm doing a panel this evening in OCD. I'm one of few Black faces in the OCD world. And yeah, I get up there and I speak the language that is appropriate for that environment.
Yeah.
And so I can get in there and I can articulate. And even doing this podcast, I've had to like switch my lingo because I'm so used to talking in the academic world and using academic language that sometimes I forget how to have just a regular old everyday conversation. You start hearing me say evolution and implication, and all I meant to say was, how things grow into, they get there, and,
right.
And this is the impact that it can have. You spend 7 or 8 years doing that.
Regular English.
Yeah. Not the King's English, not the King's English. Yes. But I say all that to say is that these are the things that start to chip away at who we identify as a Black person, right? Yeah. And we have this internal process of trying to figure out what's going on with us. And so we take these into our workspaces and the grocery store. And so it's stuff like that comes up, especially when you go Mother Bear. Because I've had some interesting experiences being Mother Bear in some of these schools. And I know people can relate to that. And again, that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. But that's where we're going, right? That's what we're talking about. We are traumatized. And at some point we'll get to talking about, what it looks like. And that's been the whole platform this whole month. This is Minority Mental Health Month. And so if you've been on any social media, there's been conversations about relaxation, racial trauma, racial stress. We've been witnessing harm to Black people for so many years.
Right.
That in itself is traumatic, y'all. Yeah. That is traumatic. If you grew up in any environment where violence was the norm, and meaning it like community violence, right? Just shootouts, whatever. And this ain't just Chicago, y'all. Like I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived in downtown, and I was jumping rope in the middle of a shootout. Come on, y'all. Like that's so. Sometimes our trauma is internal, and it's still racial trauma. And sometimes our trauma is external and it's still racial trauma. Yeah. But we are witnessing, especially now, this heightened, intense level of stress and trauma around race. Because not only are we dealing with, we're dealing with overt racism now, and I'm going to applaud that orange thing up in there that's in the White House, because I appreciate my racists being real. I appreciate him bringing out the real racists. Come on now. I was living in Kentucky, y'all, and I moved to Michigan.
That's the only good thing anybody, I guess, could have said about
that is about the only good thing that I
can't even say gentleman, the dude in the White House. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Is that from my perspective, living in Kentucky for so long and then moving to Michigan, I appreciate my overt racist people. Long as you don't cross no line and make it physical, we good. You can say what you want to say, because it's not going to affect me that way. But the most challenging and stressful thing about dealing with, living our life and dealing with the stress and trauma is that mental gymnastics that we have to do to figure out, was he like really being like racist, or was he just like, did he not mean it, or all this stuff that we do to figure out what's going on? Like, it's so much work that we have to figure out. So I am all for it. Like, I'll tell you, thank you.
Is there like
real racist?
Is there a mental health equivalent of that? Like, I'm wondering if people are able to connect that to something that is not about like racism, if it will help them understand the weight of that work, of that energy that we're spending.
So it's past that. So there is real racial trauma work. I do specialize in treating racial trauma and stress. There's real racial trauma work, and it is very much, you see an overlap in threat, right? So if you have an anxiety disorder, or you've been dealt with trauma in any way, right? So people like to jump straight to PTSD, but there are criteria you have to meet in order to meet criteria. Or criteria you have to meet in order to get the diagnosis of PTSD. But the DSM-5 has moved towards, and that's why there is this witnessing of harm to others that was added recently to the diagnosis because of that, because it's a trauma response, right? So that's what that's what it's equal to. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into going out into the world, or maybe you've experienced like discrimination in the workplace, and so you're preparing to like interact with this person, right? Or you're avoiding a lot of things, or you spend a lot of time at home, like just ruminating over like that. That's the equivalent. And that's why it's literally called racial trauma. Because this is not some regular Joe Schmo, regular old, oh, you're just overreacting, or no, y'all, these processes that we keep building up, it's mental energy. It is problematic. It starts to affect your mood. You start worrying a lot. You start having physiological responses to it. Your hands start sweating. You start getting sick and fatigued, and you don't want to go into work the next day. And so these experiences, we can easily, if you look at the DSM-5, you can put it under an anxiety disorder. You can put it under an anxiety disorder. DSM-5, I'm sorry, the diagnostic manual. That's what we use to diagnose disorders.
To diagnose things, okay.
Yes, so it's the clinical book. And this is how this is what we use to diagnose folks. So this is how you meet criteria when you go to the doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist and you want to use your insurance to get treatment, the ICD-10. So, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the equivalent. So, and this is why you've seen all this stuff on social media saying you need to seek help, because this is real. This is not you overreacting. This is not, we should not be minimizing what's going on with us. This is important. This is super, super important. So
when Mary Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, this really is making, is making us sick. There is this mental health, this health and wellness and well-being element is real.
Yes.
It's so real.
And don't be black in anything else, right? Because we can't, we are black women. So that on itself is another layer. And then add sexual orientation, right? Yeah. And then add any religious or cultural practice of anything. It's a cumulative effect of racial trauma, right? It's just on and on and on. And then you go specifically into ethno-violence, right? But that's violence within a particular ethnic group or culture. And we talked about racial microaggressions, meaning I'm not racist. I have a black fill in the blank, as if you can be immune to racism because you filled in a blank. No. Or I don't see race. We are all the human race. So that's erasing my blackness. Didn't I just tell y'all how important it was to me? I love being black. So if my blackness is insignificant, I don't
My blackness is not the problem. It's the junk that you attach to it that you should not be attaching to it.
Tell them again.
That is the problem.
Tell them again.
So see that I'm black.
Yeah.
And leave out all the other nonsense that you automatically attach to blackness, and we're good.
Yep. Then you have the vicarious trauma, right? So that's what we talked about, the DSM added. So again, for people who don't know what the DSM is, it's a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders. So that's what we use to make diagnoses. So they added the witnessing of trauma, and that is especially relevant for Black people, right? So we're experiencing racial discrimination indirectly through close contacts, families, friends. I mean, tell me the last time you ain't heard nobody say somebody was racist towards them. You can go on social media, you see them attacking somebody else and you get mad. How many times you had to scroll past them? I just can't even engage today because y'all just sound stupid, right?
Right.
And it can also be experienced by those who identify with the victims of racism generally just on the basis of race. So this is what we're dealing with George Floyd. Well, I know George Floyd. I know him. I don't know Breonna Taylor. I don't know them people, but I'm connected to them just because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Yeah. I am just sick and tired. And I don't even think people realize that this has literally been going on for at least 10 years now. Well, every year, it has been some other person. Like that we just keep adding up hashtags, y'all. Can you believe endless. It's been 10 years? I believe it's been 10 years, but it has been 10 years.
Can you believe it's been 400 years?
Yeah, you're right.
You know?
You're right. You better it's been longer than that.
Y'all. Yep. And it was Fannie Lou Hamer. Yep. When she said we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, she said that in the 60s, I think 50. I want to say it was in the 60s. We can fact check that. But she was sick then.
They were sick and tired.
Her and her peers and activist peers were sick and tired then.
Yes. All right, folks, we're going to end it there for now. We want to make sure we hear from you, so send us a note or your thoughts on the question of the day. And if you want to speak to us on a topic, send it our way. You can find us on our social media platform at wannabeanally or email us at wannabeanally@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to So You Want to Be an Ally wherever you get your personal podcasts.
You can find me, Olanike, at my website, www.mosaicforequity.com. That's Mosaic, MOSAIC, 4 as in the digit 4, equity, EQUITY. Follow me on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Mosaic for Equity. You can find me with that handle, and on Instagram as well.
You can find me, Darlene, at my website, www.parentzonellc.com. And follow me on Facebook at Donnie Davis, that's DAUNI, and Parent Zone LLC. And on Instagram at PZ Parenting Coaching. All right, we're out.
Bye.
See you later.